Oh, hey, you know what I should talk about? Detective games. I mean, it's kind of obvious where I was going with this.
Detective games are a pretty popular subgenre of point and clicks that I've always wanted to get more into, because admittedly, I haven't. There are a whole bunch of Sherlock Holmes games and other unique gems that I just haven't put a whole bunch of time into yet.
And I love mystery, so it seems like an oversight not to explore this side of a genre that I already love.
That said, last year I did play 2018's Lamplight City from Francisco Gonzalez of Grundislav Games. Lamplight City is an adventure game on the fairly ubiquitous AGS engine, Adventure Game Studio, which, if you've played any number of point and clicks from independent studios, you've likely had at least some experience with in one game or another. Lamplight City takes place in an alternate history 19th century, in a city that's part New Orleans, part Victorian England, and part New York. The geography of this world is a bit different, and technology is a tad more advanced. You have airships and factories amid a pretty impressive industrial revolution. In fact, this game kinda falls under the steampunk category, but not obnoxiously so. No eccentric goggle-wearing weirdos in this game.
Keeping busy down here, Edwards?
Oh, you know me. I've always got my hands in someone.
Okay, yeah, there is one. You assume the role of Detective Miles Fordham, a totally not tired man who definitely gets enough sleep every night and looks like he maintains a healthy schedule.
Oh, so relatable. I get all the sleep every day.
I am, of course, being facetious. Miles is actually haunted by the voice of his killed-in-action partner, Bill Legere, lodged deep within his brain, pestering him to solve his murder.
You think I enjoy being trapped here, listening to you whine about how hard your life's become? You at least still have yours.
Oh, is that what it means to live rent-free in someone's head?
Either way, across the game you have 5 cases to solve, which can allow Miles to achieve a modicum of closure for his past mistakes. The operative word here, of course, is can. These cases can be solved correctly, or you can make a whole bunch of mistakes. And doing so does have consequences.
Ugh. What is wrong with you? Get out of here this instant, or I'll have you arrested.
What the hell were you thinking, Miles? Have you gone insane?
Get too much wrong, approach people the wrong way, and you may end up locked away from key evidence you need for the right answer. You may even end up locked up in general.
And I love that this game allows you to get the wrong answers. Getting everything right requires a keen eye and a careful tongue.
If you want to be a jerk like many other adventure game protagonists, then you may run into some roadblocks here. I kinda fell in love with this game after streaming it last year, and I thought it warranted talking about, especially with another game coming up set in the same world called Rosewater.
And heck, I don't talk about newer adventure games enough on this channel, so I want to change that. So join me, as we uncover the dark deeds that lie within Lamplight City.
The game begins with Miles Fordham and his partner Bill Legere investigating a fairly mild case. A burglary at a flower shop, where what's stolen are flowers. Flowers that are then paid for. Seems like an odd crime, and one hardly worth bothering with. Either way, we soon get a good grasp of the rapport that Miles and Bill have for each other.
Oh, and by the way, Miles, you didn't do such a great job of cleaning your shoes.
That would explain all the funny looks I've been getting.
Miles is the pretty straight-faced lead, and Bill is there to make snarky comments.
Always so to the point, Fordham. If ever there was a better time to stop and smell the flowers.
I think I'll leave that to you, Bill.
With my allergies? Hardly.
And now that I think about it, this is actually a pretty common dynamic in adventure games, but I like it. And Bill is immediately likable and not, irritating. That is always a risk with this dynamic. Anyhow, this prologue introduces many of the key mechanics of the game. First of all, the interrogation screen. Lamplight City does it with these close-up portraits of Miles and whoever it is he's talking to. And if you're a fan of the point-and-click genre, it may seem familiar.
What do you know about the voodoo murders?
Just what I read in the paper, same as you.
That's right. It's visually the exact same as the dialogue style from Gabriel Knight's Sins of the Fathers, which is probably my favourite adventure game of all time, honestly. I have a lot of love for that one.
So in other words, this absolutely bloody delights me.
This isn't even the only homage to Gabriel Knight 1 in this game. I mean, I mentioned before that the area of New Britannia has some particularly New Orleansian aesthetics. And well, New Orleans is the setting of Hare Knight's seminal outing. We'll discuss more of these homages as they come up, but don't get me wrong, this is so much more than just a Gabriel Knight clone. In fact, other than aesthetics, the two don't have a huge amount in common. It is, after all, a detective game first and foremost, so Miles has much detectiving to do. But first...
Yes, I'm right here. There's really no need to ring that bell when I'm standing here. Ah!
You've had your...
Ah, yes. Yes, I see. I do believe that is what's known as a dick move.
Alright, okay, for real now. Miles and Bill need to see if they can find where the burglar is entering the shop. In the attic, there's a small crack in the window that could potentially give access to the window latch. Perhaps with the right tool, someone could find their way into the shop. And that might be how the supposed burglar is getting in. So using one of the hooks from the hanging plant pot downstairs, you can do a little experimentation to see if this works. And it does. Also, it's worth noting that the way inventory puzzles work in this game is very simple. No throwing items everywhere to see what sticks. If you have the item you need, it'll just get used when you click. The entire thing is streamlined. Lamplight City simplifies the whole point-and-click process, so the focus is on investigating and clue hunting, rather than wrestling with your pockets full of variously useful stuff.
And as much as I do enjoy that sometimes, I think it would have taken away from this particular game.
The prologue does a good job of introducing the world, and the flower shop owner, Mrs. Hanbrook, is a great character to do this with. You learn that she's a fiercely independent widow, managing her own business in a particularly run-down area of the city, where criminal matters are so often deemed unimportant.
Have you noticed any suspicious characters lurking around?
Detective Fordham, this is Chumley. You can't throw a stone without hitting a suspicious character.
As a consequence of this, it wasn't actually Mrs. Hanbrook who made the call in the first place, but her assistant Trevor, and their strong relationship, loving and yet kept strictly business, really makes these characters feel like more than just cardboard cutouts or a checklist of mere tropes. Who these people are and how they interact with each other really informs the world. Oh god, this game is incredible at world building. We'll get to that. Anyhow, with the method of entry deduced, it's time for Miles and Bill to stake out the shop and catch the benevolent flower thief in the act. Just as long as nobody has any flower allergies, of course.
Oh no.
Bill?
Damn it, Bill!
And so the burglar runs, Bill in hot pursuit, leading to a confrontation on the roof with Bill taken hostage. It doesn't matter what you do here, whether you try to shoot the burglar or not, because it ends in tragedy.
Fordham, are you insane?
Bill, don't! Bill! Bill! Oh God!
Bill!
So
Bill!
sorry.
Bill! Bill!
Months later, and Miles is kind of a mess. Bags under the eyes, messy hair, unkempt stubble. The poor guy isn't doing so well. And the culprit is Bill, or rather, the disembodied voice of Bill, now trapped in Miles' head.
Miles, wake up! Your house is on fire!
Huh? What?
You see, I told you it was funnier when I did it to you.
I really love this setup because it's unclear why Bill is here. A manifestation of Miles' guilt and self-loathing? A ghost with unfinished business? Or some kind of weird science gone awry?
In this world, it could be any of those things, but as the story unfolds, you find evidence for each avenue.
Fortunately for him, Miles doesn't live alone. He's a married man, with a wife called Adelaide, affectionately dubbed Addie. And I love Addie.
You were talking in your sleep again.
Did I say anything interesting?
Do you ever?
You have to admit, she's got you there.
She's one of my favourite characters in this game, if not my overall favourite. Being more than just the wife character. There's a solid amount of depth to her. She does love Miles, but is also very much and rightfully concerned for him. In order to sleep at night, Miles has to take a soporific to keep Bill quiet, which has had the adverse effect of somewhat dulling his senses. But yeah, this does concern Addie, and how Miles deals with Bill's death affects their relationship throughout the game. On a side note, what about how their relationship is seen by the people of this world? Given that this world takes place in an alternate 19th century, not that dissimilar to our own, Addie and the other black characters of this world do face a racist society. We're going to learn a whole bunch of things about the racist attitudes of this world, which could be a little harrowing. So I'm going to give you a fair warning now, this game doesn't shy away from talking about that. Mostly in Miles' first case, which is what I'm going over in this video. This case is given to you by your informant in the police, Constance Upton. Oh right, yeah. After the incident with Bill, Miles is no longer with the police, instead working as a private investigator. In fact, many of the police actually blame him for Bill's death as well.
And if I manage to find the man responsible?
The man responsible is standing before me.
So to keep his work going, he gets cases from Upton while meeting in a shady coffee shop. I also really like Upton as a character too. She's unusual for a game like this. And actually, in the original script for the game, she was initially a male character. You've likely seen this sort before, a typical overweight police worker with marriage troubles at home. But you've likely seen this on a male character. Narrative designer Jess Haskins, who worked with Francisco on the game, decided that the character would be more interesting if the gender was switched.
And I agree. It's not a typical dynamic you'd see between a male and female character, but it feels pretty natural.
Like many of the people you meet in this game, she feels genuine. Again, much like Handbrook, she feels like a real person, as opposed to a mere trope. I believe the backstory here is that Miles helped Connie escape a toxic marriage, and they've remained good friends since, to the point where Upton tips Miles off about cases that she thinks the police can't solve. Speaking of which, let's discuss this first case, as it revolves around the attempted murder of a grande dame by the name of Laura Dupray. She was found with her heart stopped, presumed to be dead, and was about to be buried until it was discovered that she wasn't dead at all.
And almost buried alive. How grisly.
Her family was understandably horrified, and the grande dame herself was left unable to speak or move after the ordeal. What's interesting is, you might have already heard something about this at this point. Lamplight City puts a lot of work into its world building through various methods, but one of these is newspaper articles. At the beginning of each case, you can read about 4 different things. Some of it is relevant to current or future cases, and other parts just inform the world of Vespuccia. Case in point, the one here actually mentions the supposed death of the grande dame we'll be looking into, a piece about an airship disaster, a piece about in-universe science called ethericity, and some murders at the Chum. All of this is relevant in some way. Your view of the world is built up with subtlety, even through minor things like the coffee shops and pubs having conversations that you can overhear.
The boss takes care of his own, especially considering it was his machines that chewed up my arm.
That's nice to hear. More bosses should be like that.
Snooping on people's conversations has never been so rewarding.
They talk about society, politics, that sort of thing. It's all super interesting, especially when you've played the game more than once. You pick up on extra details that you missed. So anyway, we've got some proper detectiving to do. For the attempted murder of this rich lady, the police do already have a suspect in custody, but Upton thinks they've got the wrong guy. And it's up to you to find out if that's true. And from there, you've got free rein to approach the case however you like. I generally tend to visit the victims first, and follow up on each lead systematically as they come up. Visiting the Dupray estate, you can find the catatonic victim and the doctor looking after her in the courtyard, as well as her son indoors, Andrew, who is currently as high as a damn kite.
That's a rather exotic bird you've got.
I like looking at him. He has such pretty colors, doesn't he?
That he does.
You know, I've always wondered what he might taste like. Is that bad, do you think?
I really couldn't say, Mr. Montgomery.
Well, at least he's having a good time, I suppose.
So, yeah, he might not currently be too much help, though perhaps, if sobered up, he could provide some extra information. We'll get to that. As for the rest of the house, there are a few details to uncover. There's an interesting piano which has an achievement for playing a draft from Loom.
That's a nice melody. Reminds me of my mother.
That's cute. There's also some terrible poetry written by the grande dame.
Well, that was life-changing.
For once in my life, I'm completely speechless.
And a letter threatening someone. Interesting. Stay away from my daughter and my home. The letter was found amongst the grande dame's stationery and seems to have been written by her, but it's only a snippet. So who was it addressed to? That's the question. Well, the individual the letter was addressed to is referred to using a word for a mixed race person, which is considered really dated and offensive nowadays. So it seems that Mrs. Dupray had some prejudices of her own, which is very concerning when you take the servants into account. Again, we'll come back to this as well. This whole racist attitude from the victim could be a justification from the perpetrator. Speaking of which, we can visit the supposed attacker in the Bow Street jail, Albert Martin. Obviously, he's immensely glad to see you, as if he's convicted, he'll be hanged. So you know, any chance this guy has to get out of this situation, he'll take.
So what does he think of the victim?
What can you tell me about Madame Dupray?
What's to tell? She's a twisted, evil woman who got what was coming to her. Whoever attacked her deserves some sort of reward for the service they're doing the community.
Well, that is honest. Perhaps a little more than he should have been, given that it doesn't help his case at all.
He reveals that he's in a relationship with Mrs. Dupray's daughter, Juliet Montgomery. So quite clearly, that letter from Dupray was addressed to Martin, which does establish a motive here. Albert being the attacker does add up. But that would be too easy, wouldn't it? And this isn't an Occam's razor situation, no matter what the achievement for taking this path is called. As a matter of fact, each case has a couple of red herrings to throw you off the scent. It's still pretty important to investigate these leads, as they aren't totally useless. They can provide useful information to understand the full story. For instance, in one of the later cases, you can solve a murder but miss out on an entire scheme from a politician, which was the reason the victim was even at that location where he died in the first place. And I really like that. I really like how doing a full investigation just paints the full picture, which not only gives you the best chance at solving the case, but also gives you a good insight into the people of this world.
Again, world building, it's incredible here.
But back to this first case and clearing the name of Albert Martin. He gives you a code phrase to tell his mother to let her know that he's okay. St. Roch's dog is barking. I love this because it reminds me of Gabriel Knight 1, in which he'd also learn phrases and ask people about them.
What do you know about the voodoo murders? Cabri Sancour. What did you say?
The Gabriel Knight comparisons don't stop there either, as when you visit Albert's mother, she turns out to be a voodoo practitioner, and will even educate Miles on the subject, teaching a number of things that Gabriel learned in his own investigations. Yeah, this first case is chock full of homages to Sins of the Fathers, and I adore that. Hell, if you upset Albert's mother, you can even get yourself thrown out, and the achievement you receive?
What can you tell me about voodoo?
You know, I feel like this whole game was just predisposed to tickle my fancy.
But if you're still thinking that this game is an imitation of Gabriel Knight, then you'd be wrong. It just kind of gets the references and inspiration out of its system in this first case. The other four are entirely unique territory. Anyhow, you might have noticed that a couple of family members were conspicuously absent from the Grand Dame's side. Her daughter and, more crucially, her husband. Even the doctor knows that it's unusual that he hasn't stuck around. Something to hide, perhaps? But unfortunately, we don't have his location handy. Perhaps one of the servants of the house is able to help. Emily is the cook, and is clearly somewhat nervous about this whole situation. So much so that telling her you're a private investigator actually locks you out from further conversation with her. And there are a few instances where this can happen across the game, even the inverse, where not telling someone you're a private investigator locks you out. You absolutely need to read people and approach them with the right attitude, revealing only the most pertinent information, or else you could lose a lead. But if you gain her trust, Emily notes that one of the gardeners, Marcel, has been missing for a little while. He replaced Guy Dumas in the role, who ended up going missing as well, alongside a servant called Celine. All three of these people mysteriously missing. That's worrying. And that makes things fall into place a bit, especially with the detail that Jean Dupray, Laura's husband, is actually afraid of her.
It sounds like Laura might have had some skeletons in her closet, to say the least.
And a bit of snooping around her study afterwards reveals...
Well, this should be the book Amelie mentioned. Well, what have we here?
A whip, and it has dried blood on it. How ghastly.
This house is just full of secrets, isn't it?
Okay, yeah, I did say this would get heavy. I wouldn't say that any of the other cases in this game have themes quite as harrowing as this first one has. But they all tend to touch upon the social issues of the world. Race, gender, sexuality, anxieties over machine automation replacing workers, politics, domestic abuse. There's a lot here. It's a world that can be dark and very tragically real. And from my perspective, I believe the writing approaches a lot of these issues with a good degree of sensitivity. The developer commentary indicates that much of it was run by people and workshopped to make sure these issues were approached properly. And I'd say they were successful.
Maybe my particular personal viewpoint is a bit limited, and I freely admit that, but it does seem well done to me.
Like our world, the world of Vespuccia can be ugly, harrowing, shocking even, but also there's a lot of good too. There are people worth fighting for and causes worth believing in, and Miles is clearly a fighter for the underdog in this world. You can tell a lot about a person from the people they surround themselves with. For Miles, you have Addie, Upton, and Bill. Addie and Upton I've talked about a bit already, but let's talk about Bill. Bill is an out and proud gay man, and while I'm not certain if it's an accepted part of society in this alternate history, Bill is unapologetic in who he is and very much says what's on his mind. Or rather, what's on his mind in Miles's mind.
Don't think about it too much.
Bill is also probably one of the funniest characters in this game. Pretty much every line he has while trapped in Miles's head is dripping with sarcasm and sass, his lighter tone alleviating what could be pretty heavy and dour at times.
I always told Albert to be careful around those high society types, but that one always thinks with his heart first.
Is she sure that's the correct body part? That chest is full of undressed dolls? What the hell is wrong with this old bat? Is that supposed to be a lion?
We still need to find Mr. Dupray, and perhaps Laura's daughter can help, since she has a positive relationship with her stepfather. Juliet can be found at the University of New Britannia as a student of botany, and if you were snooping around her family home earlier, you might have discovered a letter in her room, as well as a spare key to her student accommodation. It is perhaps possible that it wasn't Albert that did this to Laura, but her own daughter. Being in a relationship, they'd very much have the same motive to do so after all. And some evidence at Juliet's place suggests she was running experiments to leave living creatures in a catatonic state, just like her mother. That's pretty damning stuff. And at this point, you can either accuse Juliet or Albert of the crime. And one of the best parts of Lamplight City to me is how you're allowed to be wrong.
A lot of detective games pretty much just shoehorn you into the correct solution, but Francisco Gonzalez wanted to make a game where you weren't.
It's a game where you could get the wrong answer or be locked out of the right one. As long as you have enough evidence, you can choose to accuse a number of suspects across the cases, and this can have consequences. I remember my first playthrough where I accused Juliet of the crime, since at that point in time, it added up. And later on in the third case, John Dupray wouldn't let me in the bank he works at because I ruined Juliet's life.
Well, the evidence was clearly wrong. You've ruined her life as well as my family's.
This in turn locked me out of a whole section of that investigation. Now I don't believe you're ever locked out of getting the right answer due to mistakes from previous cases, but you do end up missing the full picture. There are entire characters and side stories I missed on my first playthrough because of this, which made the game really fun to replay. Almost like trying different paths in a visual novel.
And getting things wrong never felt so right.
Either way, you may be picking up that I'm implying that Juliet is the wrong answer here because, well, she is. As is Albert. Both are red herrings here. But the evidence we found at her place does give us a bit of leverage with her, so we can then learn the location of Jean Dupray, since we haven't met him yet. He's been spending his time at a hunting lodge, as many a rich person is prone to do. But why is he doing that and not staying at home? He's a little apprehensive when you first meet him, clearly afraid of his own shadow.
Just don't tell him that.
Come on, Mr. Dupray, you're clearly afraid of your own shadow.
What?
Don't deny it, Sean. You're as yellow as a chum harlot's teeth.
Mr. Fordham, I agreed to answer your questions, not to be insulted. I think it's best if you leave.
Well, so much for this line of inquiry.
He won't talk to you if you tell him that. No. If you discovered the whip already, you can essentially get him to admit that Laura is a cruel, abusive, racist woman who assaulted her own servants. But without concrete evidence, this testimony can only go so far. We need to find something a bit more substantial. For instance, what happened to Marcel, Guy, and Celine, the servants who have gone missing? That's the key to this. There's still a little bit more investigation we need to do, and it involves where the Grand Dame was almost buried. It's also where we'll find out some more about the pill side business that Andrew is running. Oh yeah, that's a thing too. Look at this guy, that is definitely the face of a rich boy making and selling his own pills.
Naughty, naughty Mr. Fordham.
And getting some of these pills is how you sober him up to get information from him. But alas, the mausoleum is being guarded by a police officer who won't let Miles in.
Of course, it's an adventure game. It would never be that simple.
Though instead of using some kind of inventory item or some kind of dialogue puzzle, you actually need to ask Adelaide for help. Addie can help you in a number of ways across the game. She's a very layered character who has her own talents, and they can be useful throughout. She's a dab hand at boiler repair, which is useful in case 2. And she's a hairdresser for a lot of rich ladies who love to talk her ear off about all the latest gossip. So she can get you a little bit of extra information there too. There's actually a moment in case 3 where if you upset her with a specific dialogue option, she'll refuse to speak with you for the rest of that case. And of course, that means she won't help you, locking down certain avenues. I love how Addie is used in this game. She feels like a properly 3-dimensional character. Anyhow, in this case, you persuade her to help you with distracting the police officer at the cemetery, so you can sneak into the mausoleum. A sound plan, but the officer seems to have some prejudices of his own.
Don't think I can't tell what your game is. You're trying to lure me away from here and into some alley where your gang of Sambos is gonna rob me blind. Exactly how many?
Which complicates things. Luckily, Miles knows how to handle this.
Bring them.
Just one.
ACAB, baby!
And he doesn't appreciate you talking to his wife that way.
Now, the game doesn't actually give you a choice in this situation. This is just the type of guy that Miles is, willing to punch a racist. Good quality for a protagonist in my opinion. Solid stuff. You might not like the removal of agency there, but Miles is still a distinct character who makes his own choices outside of player control sometimes. And sometimes these are good choices, but sometimes they're not. But with the lights turned out on this jerkwad, we can pretty easily make it in and out of the mausoleum. And as such, we can find the vigor pills that Andrew made stashed in here. But also a tomb for Celine. But that's the name of... Oh. There's also a piece of paper sticking out of here. You can try to take it out with your hands, but Miles can't quite get a grip on it. Besides, you'd risk tearing it with that method.
But why would you do it that way? What are you, a barbarian?
No. A bit of careful detectiving with tweezers is what you need here. She will pay for what she did to you, my love. Oh boy, that's juicy. But it's not much to go on. If only there was a further lead on the other side. Oh, there we go. It's a receipt for a hotel stay. A Somethington Arms. Neither Miles nor Bill can recall a hotel by that name, but perhaps someone else can. Much like Addie, Upton can also aid you throughout the game. She has a lot of local knowledge herself and can help you chase up leads. Anytime you speak with her, you can select Review Case to go over some evidence and see what she makes of it. It's useful to check in with her every now and then if you feel stuck. She might just have the insight necessary to help you.
There's no shame in asking your friends for help. In fact, sometimes you need to do that. That's a real life lesson right there.
In this case, she recalls the name of the Bolston Arms in Chumley, which is where you'll find, you might have guessed, Guy Dumas, the previous gardener. And he's actually surprisingly forthcoming with his confession. He explains that Laura Dupray was a horrible, violent woman who would beat her servants severely, or lock them up in a tiny, claustrophobic secret room. At one point, she ended up beating Celine to death by mistake. And you see, Celine and Guy were in love, set to be married as well. This set him on a path of vengeance, so we learn of some toxic plants in Juliet's books that would make it seem as if she had died of a heart attack. So when she was buried, she would be entombed in the same way she did to some of her servants. However, Guy didn't account for the fact that somebody else could take the blame for his actions, and he does feel remorse for that. But for our final piece of evidence, we need to locate that secret room. And apparently Mrs. Dupray would always say the same thing whenever putting someone in there.
A perfect servant must behave.
Sickening, but it is a clue nonetheless. And it just so happens that she owns a parrot that repeats things that are said. Perhaps this pretty bird can help. So when you repeat this code phrase to the parrot, it responds.
A perfect servant must behave.
And now you'll taste an early grave. Me sofa, Ray. In the middle, see?
Strange grammar, but there was a sofa in her study. Perhaps there's a secret button in the middle.
Nothing.
Damn that bird, what the hell was he babbling about?
Oh, not. No, if you have any musical inclination, perhaps me so far Ray in the middle C means something else to you. Especially when you see this note in the study. Yeah, remember that piano? If you then play me so far Ray in the middle C, we find our secret.
That seems to have done something.
Dear God!
And I think we may have also found Marcel. Poor guy. It's a horrible way to go. With that though, you very concretely have enough to lock up Dupray for good, even in her current state. But what to do about Guy? One might argue that he was justified in his actions, but those actions did lead to the near execution of an innocent man, and the death of another, as Marcel was locked up in the secret room when Mrs. Dupray had a supposed heart attack. She was never able to let the man out. So when wrapping up the case and letting Upton know about it, you have a couple of choices. Condemn or acquit. You can play the law straight and arrest Guy as well as Laura, or you can take mercy on him and allow him to skip town before the police come. It doesn't mean you don't tell the truth, just allow him some time to escape.
Also, no matter who you accuse of the crime in each case, you get to watch the arrest. It's always a fun detail.
I'm afraid I must place Madame Dupray under arrest.
What? On what charge?
And with that, the case is closed, and Miles goes back to his life. You get snippets of this throughout where Miles' mental state is explored and how this strained his relationship with Adelaide. Now, this is just the first case of 5, and I don't have time to go through all of them in detail. But believe me when I say they're all as deep as this first one, and have complex morals and ideas behind each. There's one with a stolen baby, a case of what looks like spontaneous human combustion, murders outside bars, and of course it culminates in finally solving the mystery that kicked the whole game off.
Everything is built up really well, and it helps to weave this beautiful tapestry of a world.
The fact that the paranormal and the factual seem like they could be one and the same is interesting as well. Many cases have a paranormal slant to them that you could look into. You can be a Mulder or a Scully, but the game doesn't push you to believe in the unexplained one way or the other, so you have to draw your own conclusions, especially regarding the existence of Bill's voice in Miles' head. Also, I haven't touched upon the game's presentation as such, so I'll do so now. I do like the art of this game, it's mostly pretty great. Not always 100% consistent, I'll admit, but the atmosphere is carried pretty well. There are a couple of cases of wonky perspective with the backgrounds, and not all of the portraits feel quite of the same quality. But honestly, that's all just a minor quibble. It didn't take away from the game for me. The soundtrack of Lamplight City is consistently excellent though. Composed by Mark Bennis, it evokes tension and mystery throughout, and I've used quite a bit of it across this video. Also, the credits theme is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, sure, that is a real sea shanty, but the lyrics were adapted a bit, and it was recorded by a real choir for the credits. It's also pretty funny, because the shanty itself was used as a solution to one of the puzzles in a later case.
Down among the dead men, down
Well,
among the
if you
dead
can't
men.
beat 'em.
Down among the dead men, let him lie.
Yeah, you gotta do this to get an old guy thrown out of a pub for being annoying. It's a fun little puzzle, and I kind of adore it. I love all of this game even, it just hooked me. I found myself pretty enthralled with the world of Vespuccia through this game alone. And I'm excited for the next game set in this world, where you go on a Wild West adventure as Bill's sister Harley Legere. You can bet I'll talk about that one when it's out as well. I love me some Western settings in games. In the meantime, I would highly recommend picking this up. If any of what I've discussed in this video sounds like a good time, seriously, this one is worth checking out. And if you do, make sure to live with your mistakes. That makes for a much more interesting playthrough, seeing how your consequences move from case to case. Plus it amps up the replay value. You can't go wrong there.
And if you do decide to give the game a go, good luck, detective. I don't know why I decided to buy a Sherlock Holmes hat for this video. It's not a Sherlock Holmes game. I haven't got a pipe. I don't know how to smoke a pipe.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much for watching. Did you enjoy what you just saw? Consider checking out my Patreon. Having the extra support to make these videos possible means the world to me, and I offer a bunch of extras for signing up, like weekly progress reports to let you know what I'm working on, commentaries on old videos, and even downloadable scripts and images from videos. But above all else, you get my unconditional love, which many would deem priceless. But still, if you can't contribute that way, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, enabling notifications, and so on. Even the little things do actually help.